Pull up that chair. Don't worry about the rain. It's been coming down like this for 3 days straight. Feels like the city's trying to wash itself clean. Never works, but I admire the optimism. You're here because you heard about the elevator case. Everyone's heard about it by now. Most of what they heard is wrong. Let me tell you what actually happened. It started on a Tuesday. Tuesdays have a way of sneaking up on you with bad news. A woman walked into my office around 10 in the morning. Her name was Eleanor Vance. She was 50, well-dressed, and had the kind of composure that comes from years of pretending everything's fine when it isn't. Her husband had disappeared, inside an elevator, between floors. Now people disappear all the time. Usually they're running from debt, marriage, or themselves, sometimes all three. But disappearing from a moving elevator in a downtown office building, that takes creativity, or something worse. Mrs. Vance sat across from my desk and told me the story without crying. I respected that. Tears are cheap. Information costs. Her husband, Robert Vance, worked on the 18th floor of the Ashford building, insurance claims. The kind of job that slowly turns men into furniture. Monday morning, he stepped into the elevator in the lobby. Security footage showed him pressing the button for 18. The elevator doors closed. It started climbing, and Robert Vance ceased to exist. The elevator reached the 18th floor 30 seconds later. Doors opened, empty, no Robert, no sign he'd ever been there. The building had 12 floors total. You're doing the math right now. So did I. The elevator went to a floor that didn't exist, and a man went with it. The police called it a malfunction. Mrs. Vance called it impossible. I called it interesting. I took the case, 50 a day plus expenses. She wrote a check without asking questions. Desperate people never do. I told her I'd need access to the building, the security footage, and anyone who knew her husband. She gave me everything. Everything except a reason to believe Robert Vance wanted to be found. That part I'd have to discover myself. Usually did. The Ashford building stood on Market Street like a tombstone with windows. 12 stories of steel and glass pretending to be important. Built in the 30s, renovated in the 40s, and quietly dying ever since. I arrived around noon. The lobby smelled like old coffee and broken ambitions. The kind of place where dreams came to file paperwork and wait for 5 o'clock. The building manager was a man named Carmichael. He had the look of someone who'd spent too many years saying yes to people he wanted to punch. When I mentioned the elevator incident, his face went through several expressions before settling on annoyed. "Insurance investigator?" he asked. I told him private. He liked that even less. Nobody likes private. Carmichael walked me to the elevator. There were 2 of them, side by side, identical twins with Art Deco doors and attitudes. Both been inspected 3 times since Monday, he said. Nothing wrong, no mechanical failure, no explanation. Man just vanished like smoke. He said it like it was a personal insult. Maybe it was. Buildings don't like mysteries. Bad for property values. I stepped inside the left elevator, the one Robert Vance had entered. It was clean, well-maintained, and completely ordinary. Brass buttons numbered 1 through 12, a mirror on the back wall, fluorescent light humming overhead like a tired fly. Nothing unusual, nothing wrong. Just a box that moved up and down, and occasionally swallowed people whole. Standard equipment. I rode it up and down 6 times. Each trip was exactly the same. Smooth, predictable, the kind of boring that makes you suspicious. On the 7th trip, I paid attention to the numbers. They lit up in sequence. 3, 4, 5, 6. Except between 6 and 7, there was a pause. Less than a second. Easy to miss. I missed it 5 times. That's the thing about disappearances. The answer's always there. You just have to stop looking. I asked Carmichael about the pause. He looked at me like I'd asked about UFOs. "It's an old building," he said. "Old elevators have quirks. Doesn't mean anything. Everything means something. That's the first rule. The second rule is that people who say things don't mean anything usually know exactly what they mean." I made a note. Carmichael was hiding something. Question was whether he knew it. I went back to the lobby and asked to see the security footage. Carmichael hesitated. That pause told me more than any answer would have. He led me to a cramped office behind the reception desk. The room smelled like cigarettes and suspicious explanations. A monitor showed 12 camera feeds. One of them was the elevator interior. The footage was grainy. Reality always is. Robert Vance appeared on screen at 9:47 Monday morning. Average height, average build, average everything. Gray suit, black briefcase. Expression of a man who'd stopped expecting surprises 20 years ago. He pressed the button for 18. The doors closed. The camera showed him standing there, perfectly still, for about 10 seconds. Then the feed cut to static, pure white noise. The static lasted exactly 15 seconds. When the picture came back, the elevator was empty. Doors opening on the 18th floor to reveal nothing but air and questions. I asked Carmichael if camera malfunctions were common. Never, he said. Not once in 3 years. That system's solid. We had it upgraded last winter. Cost a fortune. Fortunes buy a lot of things. Honesty isn't usually one of them. I asked to see the other cameras from that morning. Lobby, stairwells, all 12 floors. Carmichael pulled up the footage. Robert Vance entered the building at 9:46. Crossed the lobby. Entered the elevator. After that, nothing. He didn't exit on any floor. Didn't take the stairs. Didn't walk out the front door. The building swallowed him whole and didn't even burp. I rode the elevator again. This time I counted. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, all the way up. Between the 6th and 7th floors, there it was. A gap in time. Not much. Maybe half a second. But enough. Enough for the elevator to go somewhere it shouldn't. Somewhere that didn't show up on any floor indicator. Somewhere that existed in the space between numbers. Liminal real estate. I needed to talk to people who knew Robert Vance, his co-workers, his friends. Anyone who might explain why a man would vanish into thin air while riding an elevator to file insurance claims. I took the stairs to the 18th floor. Walking gives you time to think. Thinking gives you time to realize you're probably missing something obvious. I was missing something obvious. The 18th floor was a maze of cubicles and fluorescent despair. Coastal Insurance occupied the entire level. 30 employees processing 30,000 ways people's lives could go wrong. Robert Vance's desk was in the corner. It was clean. Too clean. Someone had already cleared it out. Fast work for a man who'd been missing less than 2 days. I asked the nearest employee about it. Her name was Patricia Cole. She was 30, tired, and had the look of someone who'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. Mr. Harrison had it cleared yesterday, she said. Harrison was the office manager. Said it was disturbing the other employees. Having an empty desk with Robert's things still on it made people nervous. Can't have nervous people processing claims. I asked Patricia what Robert was like. She shrugged. Quiet, kept to himself. Did his work. Never complained. Never celebrated. Just existed, you know. Some people are like that. They take up space without making an impression. Robert was good at it. Best I ever saw. You could forget he was in the room while he was still in it. Useful skill in this business. Did he have any enemies? Patricia laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. You need a personality to make enemies, Mr. Orton. Robert was nice, polite, blank, like a form letter. You couldn't hate him because there wasn't enough there to hate. He showed up, did his job, went home. 5 days a week for 8 years. A human metronome. Then one day he didn't show up. The metronome stopped. I asked if anyone had cleaned out his desk before Harrison ordered it. She thought about it. Actually, yes. I saw someone at his desk Monday afternoon after we heard he was missing. Tall man, dark coat. Never seen him before. He was going through Robert's drawers. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was from corporate. We don't have corporate. We are corporate. That was interesting. Strangers rifling through missing men's desks usually meant something worth finding. I asked Patricia if she remembered anything else about the man. He had a key, she said, to Robert's desk. The drawers were locked. He opened them like he owned them, took a few papers, left. The whole thing took maybe 3 minutes. Very efficient. Like he knew exactly what he was looking for. I found Harrison in his office. He was 45, overweight, and had the complexion of a man who'd never met a vegetable he liked. When I asked about Robert Vance, he looked annoyed. "Police already asked me everything," he said. "I don't know where he went. Don't particularly care. I've got a department to run. Can't do that with people gossiping about vanishing employees all day." I asked why he'd cleared Vance's desk so quickly. Harrison shifted in his chair. It groaned in protest. "Company policy," he said. "Employee abandons their post without notice. We secure their workspace. Prevents theft. Protects sensitive information. Standard procedure. Standard procedure that happened to destroy evidence. Convenient." I asked what they'd done with Vance's belongings. "Storage," he said. "Basement." The basement of the Ashford building was exactly what you'd expect. Dark, damp, and full of things people wanted to forget. Carmichael led me down with obvious reluctance. The storage room was locked. He fumbled with keys. When we finally got inside, the boxes labeled R. Vance were sitting on a shelf near the back. 3 of them. Not much to show for 8 years of existence. Depressing, but typical. I opened the first box. Office supplies. Pens, paper clips, a stapler that had seen better days. The second box held files, insurance claims, hundreds of them. All processed, all closed. Robert Vance had been thorough. The third box was personal effects. A coffee mug, a photo of his wife, a calendar with nothing written on it, and a key. Small, brass, unusual design. The kind that opened something specific. I pocketed the key. Carmichael pretended not to notice. I asked him if the building had any storage units. "Not officially," he said. That meant yes, there are some old spaces, from when the building was constructed. Utility rooms, maintenance closets, most of them sealed off during renovations. Nobody uses them anymore. Probably forgot they existed. Old buildings are like that, full of forgotten spaces. Forgotten spaces, the phrase stuck with me. A building full of rooms that didn't officially exist. An elevator that paused where it shouldn't. A man who disappeared between floors. The pieces were starting to fit together in a way that made no sense, which meant I was probably on the right track. Nothing about this case had made sense from the beginning. Why start now? I spent the rest of the afternoon in the city archives. Dusty rooms full of dusty paper documenting dusty decisions made by dead men. The Ashford building's original blueprints were filed under commercial properties. 1,933 1,940. They were yellowed, fragile, and told a story the current building didn't. According to the plans, there were 13 floors. Not 12. 13. The 13th floor sat between what was now labeled 6 and 7. On the original blueprints, it was marked private storage, restricted access, no other details, no room layouts, just a blank space with those 3 words. During the 1947 renovations, that floor disappeared from the official records, renumbered, erased. Architecturally speaking, it ceased to exist. Legally speaking, it never had. I pulled the renovation permits. The work was approved by the city, funded by the building's owner at the time, a company called Meridian Holdings. The permits specified interior modifications and floor consolidation for improved commercial use. Consolidation is a polite word for making things disappear. I made a note to look into Meridian Holdings. Companies that erase floors usually have reasons worth knowing. Back at the Ashford building, I found Carmichael locking up for the night. I showed him the blueprints. His face went through the 5 stages of bureaucratic panic: denial, deflection, defensiveness, deal-making, and defeat. "I don't know anything about that," he said, landing firmly on denial. "Those are old plans. Buildings change. Happens all the time. Doesn't mean anything." I asked him if he'd ever noticed anything unusual about the space between 6 and 7. "Like what?" he asked. "Like an entire missing floor," I didn't say. Instead, I asked if anyone had keys to the maintenance areas. Only me and the night engineer, he said. Why? Because Robert Vance had a key in his desk, and I was willing to bet it opened something Carmichael didn't want opened. Bet I was right, too. The night engineer was a man named Frank Delacroix. He'd worked in the building for 23 years, which meant he remembered when 13 was still a number you could say out loud. I found him in the boiler room, a cave of pipes and shadows that smelled like hot metal and old secrets. He was reading a paperback western. The good guys were losing. They usually do. Frank looked at me with eyes that had seen too much, and stopped caring around 1952. You're the detective, he said. Not a question. News travels fast in buildings, especially bad news. I asked him about the missing floor. He closed his book carefully like he was sealing away a world he'd rather live in. Been wondering when someone would ask about that, he said. Took longer than I expected. The floor's still there, Frank said. Never went anywhere, they just stopped counting it. Sealed the doors. Turned off the lights. Pretended it didn't exist. Easier than explaining what it was for, or what happened there. Buildings are good at forgetting. Better than people. People ask questions. Buildings just stand there lying quietly until everyone who knew the truth dies off. I asked him what the floor was used for. He lit a cigarette. The smoke rose toward pipes that probably hadn't been cleaned since Truman was president. Storage, he said. Private storage. For people who needed things kept private. Documents, objects, secrets. The kind that couldn't go in safe deposit boxes because banks ask questions. Cost a fortune to rent space up there. Only rich people with problems used it. Can the elevator still access it? Frank nodded slowly. If you know the trick. There's a combination. You press certain buttons in a certain order. The elevator stops between 6 and 7. Doors open onto the 13th floor. Been that way since they built the place. They couldn't remove the floor without gutting the whole elevator shaft. So they just made it invisible. Architecture's version of sweeping problems under the rug. I asked him what the combination was. He stubbed out his cigarette. Don't know it, he said. Never needed to. But I know who did. Man named Robert Vance. Came down here about 6 months ago, asking about the old floor. Wanted to know if it was still accessible. I told him what I just told you. He thanked me. Left. Next time I saw him was on the news. Missing. Funny how that works. 6 months. Robert Vance had been planning this for half a year. Planning to disappear into a floor that didn't exist. Into a space the city forgot. That takes dedication. Or desperation. Usually both. I asked Frank if anyone else had been asking about the floor. Just one, he said. Tall man, dark coat. Few days before Vance disappeared. Very polite, very interested, very dangerous. I told him nothing. Some people, you just know. Tall man, dark coat, polite and dangerous. The description matched the mystery visitor who'd cleared out Robert's desk. Same man, probably. Which meant someone else was interested in the 13th floor. Someone who'd gotten there before me and was willing to make people disappear to protect whatever was up there. I thanked Frank and left him to his paperback. The good guys were still losing. I could relate. I called Eleanor Vance from a payphone in the lobby. Told her I needed to search her house. She agreed without hesitation. Desperate people always do. Her house was in Noah Valley, a modest Victorian that had seen better decades, but held on to its dignity. She met me at the door in a bathrobe, eyes red, coffee cup shaking in her hand. Find anything? She asked. Not yet, I said, but I'm getting closer. Robert Vance's home office was a small room off the kitchen, the kind of space where men hide from their families and their consciences. It was neat, orderly, and completely unremarkable. Books on insurance law, a desk with a typewriter, a filing cabinet full of household receipts. Nothing about Robert Vance suggested a man with secrets, which probably meant he had the biggest secrets of all. I searched for an hour, nothing. Then I noticed the baseboard behind the filing cabinet. It didn't match the rest of the room. Slightly newer wood, fresh paint. Someone had been working on something they didn't want noticed. I moved the cabinet and found a small compartment cut into the wall. Inside, a leather-bound notebook, Robert Vance's private journal. I opened it. The first page read, "They'll come for this eventually." The journal was a confession, not of murder, of something worse. Robert Vance had been a clerk for Meridian Holdings back in the 40s, the company that owned the Ashford building. He'd processed records for the 13th floor, seen names, transactions, things that couldn't be explained by normal business. He'd kept copies, hidden them, and now, decades later, someone wanted those copies back. I read faster. The names in the journal were familiar. Politicians, judges, a few names I recognized from old cases I'd never been able to close. Men who'd built careers on secrets stored in a forgotten floor. Robert Vance had been a young man then, eager, trustworthy. He'd seen too much, made copies, told himself it was insurance. Then he'd spent 30 years waiting for the insurance to pay off. It never did. The last entry was dated 6 months ago. "I've decided to go back," Robert wrote, "to the floor, to see if the records are still there. If they are, I'm taking them, going public. I'm too old to live in fear anymore. Eleanor will understand. Or she won't. Either way, I'm done hiding. The truth has an expiration date. Mine is coming. Might as well use it for something." I closed the journal and sat in Robert Vance's chair. The man hadn't vanished. He'd walked into that elevator, pressed the combination, and stepped onto a floor that didn't exist. He'd gone to retrieve evidence that powerful men wanted buried, and someone had followed him. The tall man in the dark coat, polite, dangerous, the kind of man who made problems disappear, including the people who caused them. I left Eleanor Vance with her husband's journal and a promise to call if I learned anything. She looked smaller than when I'd arrived. Secrets do that to people. Wear them down from the inside until there's nothing left but worry and regret. I drove back to the Ashford building. The night shift was on. Frank Delerroy was still in the boiler room, still reading, still waiting for the good guys to win. They hadn't yet. "I need to see the 13th floor," I told him. Frank looked at me like I'd asked to borrow his grandmother. "That's not possible," he said. "The elevator combination's lost." Vance knew it. Maybe the tall man, too. "But I don't. Can't help you." I asked if there were stairs. He shook his head. "Sealed off in the 50s. Concrete and rebar. You'd need a wrecking ball to get through." "There's another one way," Frank said after a long pause. "Service shaft. Runs behind the elevator. Used for maintenance during construction. Narrow, dark, dangerous. But it connects to every floor, including the 13th. If you're willing to climb, and you're not afraid of heights, or small spaces, or what you might find up there." I told him I was afraid of all three. He laughed. It sounded like gravel. Frank led me to a door marked electrical on the 6th floor. Behind it was a room full of fuse boxes and the smell of old insulation. At the back, a metal ladder bolted to the wall. "Up or down?" I asked. "Up," he said. 13th floor is above 12. Don't ask me how the numbers work. Architects were drunk in those days, or high on something better. Good luck. You'll need it. I climbed. The shaft was dark, narrow, and smelled like rust and fear. My own fear, mostly. The ladder groaned under my weight. Every step echoed upward into nothing. I counted floors by the light spilling through ventilation grates. 6, 7, 8. Between 8 and 9, the grates stopped. Complete darkness. I kept climbing by feel, alone. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Above me. Moving deliberately. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I started again. So did they. Someone was following me or waiting for me. Either way, I wasn't alone in the shaft. I reached for my revolver, then remembered I'd left it in the car. Too heavy for climbing. Felt like a stupid decision now. Most stupid decisions feel smart at the time. That's what makes them stupid. I kept climbing. The footsteps kept pace. A grate appeared above me. Light, the 13th floor. I pushed it open and pulled myself into a corridor that hadn't seen sunlight since the 40s. The air was stale, cold, and heavy with dust. Fluorescent tubes flickered overhead, barely alive. Doors lined both sides of the hall. Each one had a number and a lock. I tried the nearest. Locked. Tried another. Also locked. Someone had been busy. A sound behind me. Someone else was climbing through. I turned, ready to swing. The man who emerged was tall, wore a dark coat, and had the coldest eyes I'd ever seen. Polite and dangerous, just as Frank had described. He dusted off his sleeves and looked at me with something between amusement and annoyance. "Jack Orton," he said. "I was wondering when you'd find your way up here." I asked him who he was. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "My name is Holloway. I work for people who prefer to remain anonymous. People who have a vested interest in what Robert Vance took from this floor." He walked past me, confident, unhurried. "You're looking for him. So my difference is I know where he is. And you're standing in my way." He stopped in front of a door marked 13B. I asked him where Robert Vance was. Holloway pulled a key from his pocket, the same kind I'd found in Robert's desk. "Small, brass, unusual. In a place where he can't talk," he said. "A place where secrets go to die. The same place you'll go if you don't walk away right now." He inserted the key. The lock clicked open. "Last chance, Orton. Turn around, climb down. Forget you ever heard of the 13th floor." I didn't walk away. Walking away is for people with better judgment or worse cases. Holloway sighed like a man who'd been expecting disappointment. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. I followed. The room was small, windowless, and smelled like old paper and older lies. Filing cabinets lined the walls. In the center, a desk. On the desk, a single photograph. I picked it up. Robert Vance shaking hands with a man whose face had been cut out. "Your client's husband was a thief," Holloway said. He was standing by the window that wasn't there, hands in his pockets, calm as a priest at a funeral. "He stole records from this floor 40 years ago, records that didn't belong to him, records that could ruin people, good people, important people. He's been hiding them ever since. Now he wants to sell them. We can't allow that. He said we like it was an army." I asked where Robert was. Holloway tapped his temple, up here in my memory, and in a place where he won't be found. Nothing personal, just business. He made a choice. Choices have consequences. You know how it works. I did. I'd seen it 100 times. Men with money and secrets hiring men with guns and no consciences. The city's oldest profession. Murder for the upper classes. "You're going to kill me too," I said. It wasn't a question. Holloway shook his head. "That would create more problems than it solves. You're a known quantity. People notice when you disappear. No, I'm going to offer you a deal. Walk away. Tell Eleanor Vance her husband ran off with another woman. Collect your fee. Close the case. Live to be old and bitter. It's a good deal. Better than most." I looked at the photograph again. The man with the cutout face. Something about the shape of his shoulders, the way he stood. Familiar. I asked Holloway who it was. He glanced at the photo, then back at me. Someone who doesn't exist anymore. Like this floor. Like Robert Vance, some people are easier to erase than others. Your client's husband was very easy. You look harder. That's inconvenient. I pocketed the photograph. Holloway watched but didn't stop me. "Evidence," I said. "For when I don't take your deal." He laughed. It was dry, humorless. "You think evidence matters? Evidence is just paper. Paper burns, people burn. The only thing that doesn't burn is money, and I have plenty of that. So does my employer, more than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. Take the deal, Orton, for your own good." I asked him who his employer was. Holloway tilted his head, considering. "You've met him," he said, briefly. "At a funeral. He was wearing a gray suit and a smile that didn't fit his face. That's all I'll say. If you're smart, you'll figure it out. If you're smarter, you'll pretend you didn't. Goodbye, Mr. Orton. I hope we don't meet again." He walked out of the room and disappeared into the corridor. His footsteps faded. Then silence. I stood alone in the room full of filing cabinets and old dust. Holloway was gone. The deal was on the table. And I was still breathing, which meant either he was lying about the consequences, or I was worth more alive than dead. Neither option made me feel warm inside. I started opening drawers. Each cabinet was locked, but the key from Robert's desk worked on all of them. Small favors. Dead men's keys opened dead men's doors. The files were a historian's nightmare. Names, dates, transactions, payments to judges, favors to politicians. Blackmail material on everyone who mattered in the city for the last 40 years. Meridian Holdings had been busy. So had the men who ran it. I pulled out a few files that looked promising. Then I heard footsteps in the corridor. Not Holloway's. These were heavier, slower, less confident. I put the files in my coat and stepped behind the door. The door opened. A man entered. Short, bald, wearing glasses so thick they looked like bottle bottoms. He was carrying a briefcase and muttering to himself. "Stupid place to hide records," he said. "Stupid building. Stupid job." I stepped out from behind the door. He jumped like I'd shot him. The briefcase fell. Papers spilled everywhere. "Who the hell are you?" he asked. His voice was high, panicked. Accountant voice. I told him I was the man asking questions. He told me he was Harold Pinter, Meridian Holdings records manager. He'd been sent to retrieve the Vance files before anyone else found them. Holloway said the floor was empty, Pinter said, looking around like he expected traps. "Holloway lies," I said. "What's in these files that's worth killing for?" Pinter swallowed hard. "Everything. The whole rotten history. From the beginning." I asked him what beginning. Pinter sat on the edge of the desk. His hands were shaking. "The war," he said. Meridian was founded in 1944 by a group of officers who saw an opportunity. They'd been in Europe, seen how things worked over there. The black markets, the bribes, the way money could make anything disappear. They brought those lessons home, built an empire on secrets. The 13th floor was their vault. Robert Vance worked for them, Pinter continued. He was young, idealistic, then he saw what was in the files. Made copies, threatened to go public, they bought him off. Gave him a job at Coastal Insurance. Paid him to keep quiet. For 40 years he kept quiet. Then he got sick. Terminal. Decided he wanted to leave something behind. A legacy. The truth. So he came back for the files. Holloway found out. "Where's Vance now?" I asked. Pinter looked at the floor. "In the basement. Behind the old boiler. There's a room they sealed off years ago. Holloway uses it for launch storage. Vance is there. Or what's left of him." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not surprise, just confirmation. I'd known Robert was dead the moment I read the journal. A man doesn't disappear into thin air. He gets put somewhere, usually somewhere dark. I left Pinter in the file room with his shaking hands and his guilty conscience. He wasn't going anywhere. Men like him never do. They wait for someone else to clean up the mess. I took the stairs down. 6 flights. My knees complained. So did my conscience. Robert Vance was in a basement room behind an old boiler, dead because he wanted to tell the truth. The city has a way of punishing honesty. Always has. The basement was darker than the shaft had been. I found the old boiler by following the heat. It was massive, rusted, probably installed when the building went up. Behind it, a door. Steel. New lock. The key from Robert's desk didn't fit. I used my shoulder instead. The door groaned open. Inside, a room the size of a closet. A man sat in a chair. His hands were tied. His head was down. I didn't need to check his pulse. Robert Vance had been dead at least 2 days, maybe more. The room was cold, which slowed things down. His face was peaceful, almost calm, like he'd been expecting this. Holloway had done the job clean. No mess, no evidence. Just a dead man in a forgotten room, in a forgotten basement. I stood there for a moment, paying my respects the only way I know how, by remembering. Someone has to. I heard footsteps in the corridor, fast, determined, not Holloway this time, too light. I stepped back behind the boiler. A woman entered the room. She was in her 50s, well-dressed, with the kind of composure that comes from years of pretending everything's fine. Eleanor Vance. She looked at her husband's body and didn't scream. Didn't cry. Just stood there, hands at her sides, breathing slowly. Then she turned and looked directly at me. "I followed you," she said. Her voice was flat. "I knew you'd find him. I stepped out from behind the boiler." "You shouldn't be here," I said. She shook her head. "I should have been here years ago. Robert was hiding more than files. He was hiding from himself, from what he'd done, from what he'd seen. I married a ghost, Mr. Orton, a man who was already dead. He just hadn't stopped breathing yet." I asked her if she knew about the files. She nodded. "He told me everything. Before he went back, he knew he wouldn't come out again. Said Holloway had been watching him for months. Said it was only a matter of time, but he wanted the truth out there, even if he wasn't around to see it. That was his gift to the world. A dead man's confession." She knelt beside her husband and touched his face, gently, like he was sleeping. I helped Eleanor to her feet. The basement was no place for mourning. Neither was this city, but we work with what we have. "We need to leave," I said. "Holloway might come back." She looked at me with eyes that had stopped being surprised years ago. "Let him," she said. "I've got nothing left to lose. Robert's gone. The files are out there. And I know who Holloway works for. The man at the funeral. The gray suit." I asked her who. She pulled a photograph from her coat. The same one I'd seen upstairs, but this time the face wasn't cut out. A man in his 60s, silver hair, tailored suit, smile like a razor wrapped in silk. "Senator James Corrigan," she said. "He was at Robert's company picnic 3 years ago. Shook Robert's hand. Told him he appreciated his years of service. Robert came home white as a sheet. Said Corrigan was the one. The man who'd started it all." Senator Corrigan. The name was familiar. He'd been in office since before I was born. Clean image, powerful friends, a reputation for being above the fray. Above suspicion, which usually meant he was up to his neck in exactly the kind of fray he claimed to avoid. I asked Eleanor if she had proof. She tapped her coat pocket. Robert's copies. The originals. He hid them in our attic. Not the files from the 13th floor. His own files. 40 years of documentation. We left the basement through the service exit. The alley was dark and wet. Rain had started again. The city's favorite hobby. Eleanor walked beside me, steady, calm, like a woman who'd already buried her husband once and was prepared to do it again. I asked her what she wanted to do with the files. "Give them to someone who isn't afraid," she said. "Someone with nothing to lose. Someone like you. Flattering. And terrifying." I drove Eleanor back to Noah Valley. The house was dark. She invited me in for coffee. I accepted. Caffeine and bad news go together like gin and regret. She went upstairs and returned with a metal box, the size of a shoebox, heavy. She set it on the kitchen table and opened it. Inside, folders, dozens of them, each labeled with a name: Corrigan, Holloway, Meridian Holdings, and a dozen others I recognize from old case files. "This is enough to bring down half the city government," I said. Eleanor nodded. That was Robert's hope. His last wish. He wanted to be remembered for something other than being afraid. I closed the box. I know a reporter at Francis Hale. She's clean, or as clean as they come in this business. She'll know what to do with this. Eleanor looked at me. "You trust her?" I thought about it. Trust is expensive. I respect her. That's close enough. I left Eleanor's house at dawn with the metal box in my hands and a target on my back. The rain had stopped. The fog was rolling in. San Francisco's way of saying good morning. I drove to Francis Hale's apartment in North Beach. She lived above a bakery that smelled like hope and carbohydrates. 2 things in short supply in my line of work. I knocked. She opened the door in her bathrobe, coffee cup in hand, expression unimpressed. "At 6 in the morning, Orton," Francis said. She was 50, sharp, and had the kind of face that had seen too much and forgotten too little. This better be good. I held up the box. Senator Corrigan, Meridian Holdings, the 13th floor, and a dead man named Robert Vance. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. Come in. Pour yourself some coffee. Start talking. Don't leave anything out. I talked for an hour. Frances listened without interrupting. When I finished, she opened the box and started reading. Her face changed as she went through the files. First curiosity, then concern, then something that looked like fear but wasn't. It was the face of a woman who'd just realized she was holding a bomb with a very short fuse. This is huge, she said. Bigger than anything I've ever worked on. Corrigan's running for re-election next month. Can you publish it? I asked. Frances nodded slowly. Not all at once. Too much. Too many names. We'd get sued into oblivion before the ink dried. But piece by piece. With verification. Yes, I can do it. I'll need time. And protection. She looked at me. Holloway knows you have these files now. He'll come for them. And for you. And for me. Can you protect a middle-aged newspaper woman with a bad attitude and a worse coffee habit? I told her I'd do my best. She laughed. It wasn't encouraging. Your best got a man killed, she said. No offense. Robert Vance trusted you to find him. You found him. Dead. That's not exactly a winning track record. She wasn't wrong. I'd been late. Always late. The story of my career. Show up after the bodies are cold and take notes. Detective work is just professional regret with a license. Frances made copies of the files. 3 sets. 1 for her office, 1 for a safe deposit box, 1 for a friend in Los Angeles who owed her a favor. Covering all the angles, she said. If Holloway wants to stop this story, he'll have to kill a lot of people, including people who don't know they're involved yet. That's the advantage of being paranoid. You spread the risk around. Paranoia, not a flaw. A survival mechanism. I left Francise's apartment around 9. The fog had lifted. The city was almost cheerful. I didn't trust it. I drove to my office, parked, and took the stairs 2 at a time. The door was unlocked. I hadn't left it unlocked. I drew my revolver and pushed the door open. Holloway was sitting in my chair. Behind my desk, feet on my blotter. He was holding a photograph. The same one from the 13th floor. Corrigan shaking hands with someone. You're getting predictable, Orton, Holloway said. He didn't look up from the photograph. I knew you'd go to the reporter. I've been waiting. We need to have a conversation about what happens next. I kept the revolver trained on his chest. I'm listening. He set down the photograph and looked at me with those cold eyes. You're going to give me the files, all of them, every copy, and then you're going to leave town. I asked him why I'd do that. He smiled. Because Senator Corrigan is a very powerful man. He has friends everywhere, including the police commissioner, the district attorney, and the judge who signs warrants. If you don't cooperate, you'll be arrested for breaking and entering, or evidence tampering, or whatever we decide to charge you with. The paperwork's already prepared. Just needs a signature. Frances Hale has copies, I said. Holloway nodded. We know. She's being visited right now. By people who are very persuasive. By the time they're done, she'll hand over everything she has. And then she'll forget she'll ever had it. Memory is a fragile thing, Orton. Especially when you apply the right incentives. I felt my stomach drop. Frances. I'd led them right to her. Stupid. Careless. The kind of mistake that gets people killed. I should have seen it coming. Holloway wasn't the type to sit in my office waiting unless he had the upper hand. While I was drinking Frances's coffee, his people were already moving. I lowered the revolver, not because I trusted him, because shooting him wouldn't stop the men at Frances's door. Call them off, I said. Holloway shook his head. Too late for that. The visit's already underway. But you can still save yourself. I asked him what he wanted. He stood up, walked around my desk, and stood inches from my face. The original files. The ones Vance hid, not the copies. The originals. They have fingerprints, DNA, things that can't be faked. Give me those and I'll let you walk. Keep them, and you'll join Robert Vance in a room that doesn't exist. His breath smelled like mint. Murder with good dental hygiene. The city's finest. I told him the originals were in the metal box. He already knew that. He'd searched my office while I was gone. Found nothing. Where are they, Orton? His voice was calm, but something underneath was starting to crack, patience wearing thin. I smiled. It wasn't friendly. Safe deposit box. Bank of America. Downtown. Keys in my pocket. But you'll need a court order to open it, and we both know judges don't sign orders at 9 in the morning. Holloway reached into his coat. I raised the revolver again. He stopped. His hand emerged holding a folded document. Court order, he said, signed by Judge Morrison, dated yesterday. We were prepared, Orton. More prepared than you. Now give me the key, or I'll have you arrested for obstruction. And while you're in custody, I'll find Francis Hale and finish what my people started. He held out his hand, palm up, waitin'. I looked at the court order. Real paper, real signature. Judge Morrison had been on Corrigan's payroll for years. Everyone knew it. Nobody proved it. That was the problem with this city. The truth was always there, just out of reach, like a photograph with the face cut out. I reached into my pocket, not for the key, for a cigarette. I lit it slowly, watching Holloway's patience evaporate like morning fog. The key's not in my pocket, I said. Holloway's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes went dark. Where is it? I took a long drag, with someone you can't touch. Someone who isn't afraid of you or your senator. Someone who's already left town with the originals and instructions to publish if I don't call her every 6 hours. I was bluffing, mostly, but Holloway didn't know that. For a moment I saw doubt flicker across his face, the first crack in the armor. You're lying, he said. I shrugged. Maybe. But can you afford to bet on maybe? Because if you kill me, that phone call doesn't happen, and those files go public. Every name, every bribe, everybody, including Robert Vance's. Holloway stared at me. The clock on my wall ticked. Outside, a siren wailed. The city's heartbeat. He reached for his gun. I didn't move. Go ahead, I said. Shoot me. Then spend the rest of your life running from the people your boss blames for the mess, or walk away. Tell Corrigan the files are gone. Tell him the story's dead. Live to be old and rich, and pretend none of this happened. Holloway's hand hovered over his coat. Then he laughed. Dry. Bitter. The laugh of a man who'd just realized he'd lost. You're a fool, Orton, he said. This isn't over. Corrigan has resources you can't imagine. He'll find your contact. He'll find the files. And when he does, you'll wish you'd taken my deal. He walked to the door, paused, and looked back. Enjoy your victory. It won't last. Then he was gone. Footsteps fading down the stairs. The door clicked shut. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I called Francis from my office phone. She answered on the first ring. You okay? I asked. Fine, she said. 2 men came to my door. I told them I'd already sent the files to 3 different newspapers. They left, seemed disappointed. I laughed. It sounded hollow. You're bluffing. So are you, she said. That's how this works, Orton. Everyone bluffs until someone calls. Today, no one called. The files never went public. Not all of them. Frances published what she could verify. Senator Corrigan held a press conference, denied everything, and won re-election by a landslide. Holloway disappeared. Probably to another city, another set of secrets, another man with money and problems. Robert Vance was buried in a small ceremony. Eleanor didn't cry. She'd done all her crying in private where it belonged. The 13th floor is still there, still sealed, still full of filing cabinets and old dust. I kept one file. The one with the photograph of Corrigan shaking hands with a man whose face I never identified. I keep it in my bottom drawer, next to the bourbon, a reminder that some truths are too heavy to carry and too dangerous to drop. The city goes on. The rain falls. The elevators open and close, and men like me sit in offices waiting for the next case. My name is Jack Orton. I've been a private detective in this city for 9 years. I've learned that justice isn't a destination, it's a negotiation. You take what you can get, and you live with the rest. Robert Vance wanted the truth. He got a grave. I wanted to help. I got a photograph and a bourbon habit. The elevator between 6 and 7 still pauses. I still notice. Some things you can't unlearn. That's the job. That's the curse. That's the story.